Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Dr. Gary Sprouse wants to take you to your happy place. Let's take this trip together. Dr. Gary, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Now, you've written a wonderful book and something we all want. I can't imagine anybody saying they don't want this. It's called Highway to Your Happy Place. So I'm looking forward to really finding out a lot from you today because, of course, that's where we all want to go.
I'm here to help your audience get into their happy place. That's important. Here's what I found. I'm a physician, right? And I would say to people, they would come in and say, I'm really stressed out. I'm like, okay. I said, if you had less stress, where would you be? And they're like, wait, I don't know. Never thought that far. And that's when I came up with this idea that, hey, if you don't know where you're trying to get to, how are you going to get there?
How are you going to get there? Well, you start out the book and you say, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we react. And I'd like you to talk about that because that encapsulates, I think, everything that we face in life, etc. So can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, as humans, we're faced with a lot of adversity. And this is what I found. Like we're faced with all this adversity and you go, oh, all these things are hitting me and there's nothing I can do about it. But it turns out there is something you can do about it. Even though things are happening to you, your reaction to them is under your control. So I can't stop a COVID, pandemic from occurring, or I can't stop a loved one from dying, but I can control how I react to it. But here's the key, and this is important. If you don't know what it is that you're having, or you don't know how you're reacting, then you can't control it. And that's where this book comes in to say, hey, these are the things that are happening to you so that you can control it. So then you can get some control back over your reactions to the environment around you.
So is that what you mean? Because I wrote another quote down that we need knowledge in order to control these things. So we have to understand more what's causing us problems. Yeah. Is that it?
So I use this example of diabetes. So in the 1700s, we knew what diabetes had something to do with your sugar. So that's all we knew. So our advice to people was, hey, just eat less sugar. And that worked for some people, but not for most. So now we know, it has to do with your pancreas and your liver and your stomach hormones and your insulin transport and your insulin levels. And so now our advice, our treatments, our tools are so much more effective and efficient because we know much more about it. And so the same kind of problem I would ask these patients, they would come and say, I worry too much, Dr. Sprouse. And I go, okay, well, tell me what worry is. And they're like, well, yeah, I got this. And then they start to try to define it. And they're like, oh, man, it's harder than I thought. And that's what I found. We have all these terms we use like emotion and worry. And when you start trying to define it, it's actually really hard. And if you can't define it, well, then how are you possibly going to fix it?
That's a great point. Now, when people do come into you and they try to pinpoint it, I'm just thinking out loud, would it be relationships? Because we feel that people have difficulties getting along. Half the marriages have difficulty, financial, social, or is there other things that we wouldn't even think of, and that's what's causing the stress?
Well, here's what I found. Let's take, like what I see, unfortunately, a lot is like someone's spouse dies. And that's a really big deal. People, like, when you look at the list, people make these lists of the 100 top stresses, and your spouse dying is number 1 or number 2. What makes it so stressful? That's the key. And what it turns out is there's ingredients that make your spouse dying so stressful. And the ingredients are what I talk about in the book. So what makes it so stressful is you start worrying. You feel guilty about something you did. You regret not doing something. Your self-esteem takes a hit. You don't have anybody to go to the movies with, so now you're bored. And you're getting overwhelmed because you have so much stuff to go on. So here's what I found. You can't change that your spouse died. I can't bring your spouse back to life. But all those other ingredients that make it stressful are the things I can do something about. So I can help you worry more efficiently. I can help you not feel so guilty. All those things. So that gives you that power, that control that I can do something about this so that it isn't devastating to me.
Now, you're known as the less stress doc. You're obviously talking about stress here. I wouldn't, before going through your book, associate stress with happiness. Maybe that's my fault. I would think if we could get rid of stress, and I'll use an example. Let's say I have $25,000 in credit card bills, and all of a sudden I win on a TV show or a lotto ticket, and I can wipe that out tonight, and I've got that check in my hand. Will that make me happy, or will that just get me back to 50-50, and now I have to find a good cheeseburger or a puppy or a new car?
As I wrote this book, it was a learning curve for me too. So I started out the book with the idea that our stresses are problems, and how do I fix your stresses? But then as I was learning myself about the process that people go through, I realized that just getting rid of stresses isn't what gets you to your happy place. It's all the way around. Like, I think we were meant to be in our happy place, and all these stresses are what gets in the way of getting there. The book is, here's what your happy place is, and here's how to define it. And then here's the things that are keeping us from living in our happy place. And that's where the stresses are coming from. So the book primarily is about how to get rid of the stresses so that you can spend all the time in your happy place, which is where you're supposed to be anyway.
And I think that's obviously what we want. I didn't know if I need a puppy or a big cheeseburger or that little guy who's running for the donuts that tells me I'll be happy if I get to Dunkin' Donuts and get half a dozen munchkins or something. So,
well, what I found was everybody's happy place is a little bit different. But in everybody's happy place, there's different rooms that everybody has the same rooms. And the rooms are things like the contentment, pleasure, anticipation of pleasure, and those kinds of things. And when you put all those rooms together, whoa, that's a happy place.
Now, you say that stress comes from the side effects of our skills. Now, again, I would get that question wrong if it was true or false, because I would think the one safe place would be if an accountant is doing his or her work, they're excellent at that, or at least pretty good, because that's what they're doing, or a teacher or a ditch digger or a painter, whatever it is, that's their field. That's where they get some pride from, because presumably they do a pretty good job, or at least the vast majority. So can you explain that? Because why would it come from an offshoot of that?
First off, we got to change when you're thinking about skills, you're thinking about learned skills. Skills that I'm talking about are human skills. So our human skills are, we have the ability to envision the future. That's amazing, right? No other animal has that skill. We have the luxury of being able to choose. We have the ability to decide what's right, what's wrong. We have good and bad. So those are skills that all humans have. And the problem is that even though they're great skills, they have side effects. So I'm a doctor. I'm used to giving people medication. And I say, hey, here's a medicine for your diabetes. Oh, well, it's really good medicine. It's very effective, but it might have some side effects. And so my job then is to give you the medicine that has the most benefit and the least amount of side effects. So when I took that concept and applied it to our human skills of envisioning the future, having choice, things like that, then I go, oh, wait. Well, then the side effect of being able to envision the future is that you have to worry about what might happen. Or the ability to have choice then goes, oh, I regret the choice that I made. Or, hey, I know what right and wrong is. Oh, now I have to feel guilty that I did something wrong. Or I can handle a whole bunch of problems all at the same time. Oh, but now the side effect is then I can feel overwhelmed by it. And so when you looked at our skills and said, oh, look, these are the skills that all humans have, they just have side effects. So the idea of the book then is, well, how do I keep my skill and lose the side effect?
Now, I'm going to tap onto your life because you were good enough in your book to tell us a lot about yourself. You're a medical doctor, and our immediate thought is, oh, he drives a nice car. He probably works in a nice location, because most either medical offices or hospitals are clean, healthy looking. They look like places we would want to work and be in, have a nice environment around us. But you also mentioned maybe what we might call the downside. You had to go to medical school. That's very competitive, certainly stressful. You mentioned that you went through a divorce. Like everybody else, you have bills. And like every physician today, if anybody watches television, people get sued if you make a mistake taking their temperature, or if you give the Band-Aid and it's not the right color and it's on their thumb rather than the center of their hand. Is it safe to say that while we as the rest of the world might look and say, oh, you have a charmed life, it's easy, don't complain, everybody has this? Because, again, doctors are admired. They're thought they're knowledgeable. They're usually very smart. And they're usually making a good income. They have a nice work environment. But you're telling us even doctors have these problems.
Yeah, wow. So it comes down to, there are certain things in my life that are good. Yay, right? As you talked about income, there's a lot of respect from the community, things like that. The stresses they're different kinds of stresses. So it's like, you're trying to make a decision at 2:00 in the morning that's a life and death decision for the person on the other end of the phone. Like that, most people aren't used to that idea. I had this happen to me. I was talking to an insurance agent, and he was trying to sell me some insurance. And I go, phone rings, I pick it up, and on the other end, he's hearing my end of the story, which is like, I'm like, yeah, what kind of chest pain are they having? Okay, is it gone? No, it's just they're indigestion, blah, blah. So I end up telling the nurse, okay, well, just give him some Tums and call me back if things don't get better. And then I hang up the phone. I go back to the insurance agent. He's like, wait, did you just tell somebody who's having chest pain to just take some Tums and it's going to be okay? Like, how do you know they're not having a heart attack? And you're like, well, this. But as a doctor, you don't even realize how much stress you're under because you're making this life and death decision. Like the person across the table from me is like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that, right? So yeah, the stresses are there. They're just different kinds of stresses. You're right about malpractice. The problem you run into is like malpractice today is not, hey, the doctor did something wrong. It's like there was a bad outcome. And so then you get sued. And once you get sued, you've already lost because you've lost time, you've lost money, you worry a lot. There's all this other stuff that goes on. Your premiums go up. The next person comes along and goes, oh, well, you got sued, so I'll sue you too. So it's an issue. So that every decision you make becomes $1 million decision. That's hard to live with sometimes.
And with the pace that doctors, and I was recently in the hospital and I saw the pace for the nurses and the doctors, I don't know how they can do the simplest task. And I mean, just get the right food to the right patient, napkins, because things are moving so quickly and they have to report it. And then 20 minutes after it happens, I get a note on my phone saying, you just had lunch. You had an apple, you had chicken soup and a piece of chicken. And they're pretty much right.
That's true.
Because
really interesting.
the nurse had to put that in. Dr. Gary, before we go ahead, I'd like to let our audience know if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Dr. Gary Sprouse. He's the author of Highway to Your Happy Place. And Dr. Sprouse, I'd ask you, would you tell us the website where we can find out more information?
So the website is thelessstresseddoc.com, and that's DOC. And my email is lessstresseddoc@gmail.com.
We'll ask you that again, and if someone wants to get more information or get hold of your book, they'll find it out through the website.
That'd be awesome.
Now, you mentioned before, and I always find this interesting, that our ability to envision the future was so important. I love that as when I think of a little kid, because what do? They don't get stuck. They're not worried about paying bills. They don't care if they go to bed on time. That's up to mom or dad to make them do that. They don't care if they eat their spinach. That's up to mom or dad. But they do care if they get that ice cream they like, or Mr. Softy when the truck passes by, or whatever the latest toy is that, or card that kids are playing with that excites them. Why is that so important to adults? Do we just take that up from childhood?
Well, being able to envision the future?
In the future, yeah.
Yeah, wow. So this is an interesting point, right? Every other organism in the earth tries to keep their environment safe, but their environment only extends to where their sensory system works. So like my dog will be laying on the floor and being calm, and another dog will come in the yard, or another person will come through the yard and she'll start barking because she can sense it. But once the person leaves, she goes back to laying on the floor. But humans, so part of our environment now is the future. So when we're trying to keep our environment safe, that means you have to keep your future safe too, because we can say, oh, what if that guy had a gun? What if he came back? What if I was outside and the dog tried to bite me? What if my grandson was out there and hit? So we can think up all these things that can happen as part of our environment, because the future is so real to us that is a part of our environment. And that means we have to keep it safe. And that is literally impossible because it hasn't happened yet.
Now, Dr. Gary, looking at the future being anywhere from 1 minute to the next few hours, next few days, months or years, anywhere we go today, and we've had this with many of our guests, we're surrounded by news. And of course, what we know that bad news sells. Even if it's about the local team, there you say, we'll come back in a minute and tell you who got injured last night. Well, it might be a very slight injury, but now they've got us scared. Is this going to be an important quarterback or pitcher or somebody who's necessary for the drive to the championship? And wherever we go, even in the doctor's office, there's a television up there. We go out, we have our cell phone. We get in the car, we put the radio on, or we're looking at the cell phone when we're not supposed to. Does that cause us, and have you seen an increase of stress because of that?
Absolutely. You bring up an incredible point. So humans are a very visual organism. So we get 80% of our information through our eyes. The adage that seeing is believing is accurate. So there was a local football player that punched his girlfriend. And when we heard about it, he got a 2-game suspension. When we saw the video of him doing it and we saw what happened, then he never played football again. And because video is so much more impactful to our system, and what you're seeing is this with the advent of the 24 news cycle and the 24-hour news cycle and cell phones, and our movies are so realistic that all this visual information is hitting us. And you're absolutely right, because the problem that we're going into is that we want to listen to somebody's birthday party or somebody having a good time, but we have to watch out for dangerous things. So the analogy I use in the book is, if I had 10 people in this room that were all trying to give me $1,000, but there was one person in the corner with a machine gun, yeah, guess who I'm paying attention to? Because the $1,000 doesn't do me any good if I'm dead. So that's why humans have been designed to pay attention to dangerous things in our environment over the idea of finding something pleasurable. So I'd rather know that something's not going to kill me than try to find something to eat. As humans, now that we have this future, yeah, we can think up any kind of horrible thing and here's the key, react to it like right now.
Now, I didn't even mention this, but as you're talking, I'm thinking of it. Of course, almost all of us, we used to go home at 5 o'clock or 5:30 or 6 o'clock, or maybe we work late till 7 or 7:30 or even later. But at least when we left that office, that was usually the break point that we could go out to dinner or see our family or play. And now there's kind of no boundaries. The fence is wide open, or it's an electronic fence that covers a few miles. People can get us Sunday night, Sunday morning. We can be at the beach thinking we're having a good time, and an email comes or a phone call or a text. Did you send out that demand letter or that bill or something? It's, oh my gosh, I forgot. Now I just ruined the next 48 hours because I don't know if I'm going to get yelled at Monday morning or Tuesday or when I go back to the office. How important was that? Is that a big issue? Et cetera. Again, is that another one of those things?
Yes, well, this is one of the things that we're starting to. So I was listening to a lecture on the workplace environment, and he said that working from home started like 30 years ago during the gas crisis, which is interesting. You and I are old enough to know what that means.
I remember that, yeah.
And he said he started then. He goes, and over the next 30 years, then the pandemic came. So we had the idea of working from home, but when the pandemic hit, in combination with the technology that we had with Zoom and things like that, now we could work from home and be efficient about it. And what he found was that there's about a 15 to 20% bump increase in efficiency when you work from home. But here's the problem. Now, just as you said, there's no boundaries. So my wife went from doing a salesman's job to doing the billing in my office, and she stayed at home the whole time. And it was like she had none of the social contact that came when you were out working in the real world. And so that was devastating to her. It was a big deal. And I think there's a lot of people that, there's some benefits to staying home. You don't have to commute. You don't have to sit in traffic. Maybe you don't have to deal with some crappy person that's in the next stall to you, but you miss all that human interaction. That's difficult. And so, yeah, we're still working out how to make that process. So like my stepson, he has this combination job. So he spends 2 days at home and he spends 3 days at home and 2 days in the office. I think that's probably going to be the way the majority of work goes, is where like you spend some time at home, you spend some time in the office, and then you get both the benefits of the interaction with your staff, and you get to be at home and be flexible, because that's what they found. Like you go, hey, I had to go take my daughter to her practice. Well, I'll work, instead of working from 9 to 5, I'll work from 9 to 3, and then I'll work from 7 to 9, and then we're good.
I think what you're saying is the correct one, because we do need that it seems so. And I'm finding out from more and more of our guests that this idea of the work never ending, meaning they can reach us at virtually any time. And even clients think that we're still on duty at 11 o'clock or maybe 12 o'clock yeah. because they're up, or they can't sleep.
Yes.
So and again, your profession is a little different. If someone is sick at 12 o'clock, they're going to call you, or the doctor, and they're going to call you. But for most professions, you do feel that the accounting work, the IRS will wait till tomorrow if you didn't get it in today, because how much work are you going to do at midnight?
Yeah, I mean, and you definitely have to set boundaries. So, my patients are actually very respectful. And when they would call, and sometimes they would call late at night, there was usually a reason why they were calling. Most of the time, they weren't calling about something that was, hangnail or something dumb.
Well, you have good people.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to set boundaries and say, hey, no, this isn't going to happen. So.
Dr. Gary, before we go further, again, I'd like to let our audience know you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is Dr. Gary Sprouse. He's the author of Highway to Your Happy Place. And Dr. Gary, we're going to ask you again if you'd tell us the website where we can learn more.
Sure. The website is thelesstresseddoc.com. And then the email is lessstresseddoc@gmail.com.
And we'll give that one more time at the end of the show. So if you didn't get it down and you want to get rid of some of that stress and maybe you want to enter that happy place, we're talking to the right person, the Less Stressed Doc. I'm reading in your book something about 5 ingredients for happiness. And you also have a story there I want to talk to you about. But can you tell us about those ingredients and why they're important?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier with the room. So there's I actually added a 6th one. But so the first room is contentment. And that's the balance that we have between things that are making us feel good and things that are making us feel bad. And it becomes this line where it can fluctuate a little bit here and there. You have a good day, you have a bad day, but there's a certain baseline to it. And that baseline has a lot to do with your perceptions. There are people that live in hovels that think life is great, and there are people that live in mansions that are hating life. And it has a lot to do with how they perceive what's going on. But that level of contentment is kind of there. It's a baseline. But the second room is pleasure. So every once in a while, there's something, and it's intermittent and it's fleeting. So it comes and goes, and by definition. So something happens, you get a raise, or you get an award, or you graduate, or you have a baby, and there's this huge spike in pleasure. But then over time, it goes back down, and you get back to that level of contentment. And then the third thing is anticipation of pleasure, and that's interesting because this is where our ability to envision the future comes in. So I can say, hey, my wife and I are going on vacation. And the vacation, yeah, it's great. And that lasts for 7 days. Maybe there's some things that didn't go right, blah, blah, blah. But anticipating the vacation can go on for months. So I can think about for months and have the same pleasure as if I was on vacation for months. And it's like, great, right? And in my anticipation, there's never any problems with the vacation. So it's even better than being on the vacation. And then the fourth thing is having gratitude. And gratitude is important because I feel like when we wake up in the morning, we should be doing jumping jacks going, yay, I'm awake, I'm alive, yes, right? But most of us get on and go, okay, another day, here we go, right? So we have to get that sense of gratitude for everything that we have going for us. And then the last one is the next one is what I call fulfillment. And there's 3 parts to that. Fulfillment is learning. So it turns out humans to survive are very curious because we have to know what our environment is. So it's set up to be a pleasurable thing. So learning is a very pleasurable activity. Second is that we want to have a purpose in life. So we want to know where we're trying to get to. And it used to be for every other organism, staying alive is their purpose. But for humans, that's so easy, it can't be our purpose anymore. So we've had to come up with something else. So that gives us energy and gives us ways to make our decisions. And then the last piece is giving. And giving is like, again, because we're a communal organism, we're set up to make everybody else in our tribe survive. And so that comes into, I'm giving to you so that you can survive. And then the last piece is something I made up called CASH. And CASH is an acronym. And it stands for being connected, feeling accepted, feeling safe, and having hope. And when you put all those rooms together, that's a nice, happy place.
I'm writing that down as fast as I can. Connected, accepted, safe, and hope. Did I get it right? Dr. Ayer, one I want to say, I think the anticipation is the one I like the best because always when there was a holiday in the week, I would start preparing for that 3 or 4 days before, whether it was getting done so I could get out at 4 o'clock or a little early or whatever. But you have a great story in the book, and I hope a lot of our audience steals it from you. I'd like you to tell us, you took a family out one Christmas, and I'd like you to tell that story because it just made me feel so good.
It does, right? Gosh, I don't think they realize how good it made us feel. Anyway, so my staff and I had made a decision that we were going to give a gift to one family member every year. And so we decided this is a family they were very nice people, but they didn't have very many means. And so we decided, okay, we're going to give them a Christmas gift. And so what we did was we took them to a local Walmart, and we took them to a local restaurant. But here was my surprise. My staff didn't know this was coming. I hired a limousine to take us. And so my staff was like, wait, a limousine? Like, we've never been in a limousine. So my staff got some big pleasures out of this too. They're like, who's in the limousine? We're in the limousine. So we all pile into this limousine and we drive off to the Walmart. And I gave them a $500 gift certificate. And I said, go to the store, buy what you want, right? And I was expecting the kids to buy toys and the parents to buy whatever, some doodad. The one kid bought a blanket. I was like, what are you buying a blanket for? He goes, well, when my grandmother comes over, she gets the blanket, so we have to use newspaper. So a blanket will be great. And the husband bought a pair of shoes. And I'm like, why are you buying a pair of shoes? He goes, because when I go to church, the shoes I have holes in them, and this would be really nice to go with a new pair of shoes. I've never had a new pair of shoes. And I was like, oh my God. So it was like, yeah. The other son bought a watch for his mother. It was heartwarming. And then we took him to dinner and we had a great time. And everybody went home with a big smile on their face. And they had a great time. But I don't think they realized. I'm telling the story. This story happened like 25 years ago. And it still makes tears come to my eyes when I tell the story, because that's how important giving is to other people.
I think I'll always remember you connected with that story. And honestly, it was so poignant from your book. And what I got out of it too, you didn't just give them a check for the money that they could have gone out and did. You did this with them. Your staff enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah,
you
absolutely.
also kind of absorbed that wonderful feeling of helping the people, watching them enjoy it. And they had made a connection with you, a real live doctor who took enough time, and your staff, obviously professionals, took enough time out of their schedule to make them important, for whether it was 6 hours and a restaurant and things they probably would not have had access to, at least in the immediate future. So
absolutely.
If we're going to steal any idea from you today, you know it's going to be that one.
Well, but it doesn't even that be that big. Here's my wife. She came home yesterday with a big smile on her face. I was like, what happened, honey? She goes, well, I was at the grocery store and this lady was behind me and I was checking out and she had one item and she went to check out and she realized she forgot her credit card at home. And she's like, oh, she was all upset. And my wife was like, well, it's just one thing. She was like, yeah. She goes, well, just put it on here. So she paid for it. And the lady was like, oh my God, thank you so much. That was so nice. And she's like, well, whatever. And it's like, but my wife felt really good. And so did the lady. It was really nice. Giving is such a great thing.
It really is. And I think we all forget that. Dr. Gary Sprouse, I want to remind our audience, the book is Highway to Your Happy Place. If you're having trouble finding that happy place, we have the doctor who knows all about it. He tells you in the book, Highway to Your Happy Place. The website real quick.
Yeah, so it's thelessstresseddoc.com, and the email is lessstresseddoc@gmail.com.
Dr. Sprouse, thanks so much for being with us today. I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we'll continue our journey to success.